Well, thank you all for attending today's press conference, both in person and over the web. Today is a historic moment for Aireon and the entire aviation community, one that has been over 8 years in the making and will forever change global air travel. I want to thank the incredibly dedicated and talented Aireon team and all of our investors, partners, customers, collaborators, and supporters who have provided the expertise, the resources, and the encouragement to make today possible. We couldn't have done it without you. Now for some housekeeping items. For those viewing the webcast, if you have a question that you'd like us to answer, please include your name, your email address, and the publication you work for on the YouTube comment section at the bottom of the screen. So we have that out of the way. I have two special people with me here today, one on stage and one being broadcast remotely from London. Neil Wilson, the President and CEO of NAV Canada, and Martin Rolfe, the CEO of NATS, the UK air navigation service provider. Before we get into remarks, I'd like to direct your attention to the video to hear what many of our customers, investors, and industry experts think about today's event.
When we introduced radar from non-radar, we went from an environment where we couldn't see any aircraft to an environment where we could see some aircraft. And from 1952 until now, although we've improved the way we process radar, get a bigger picture, we by no means have a complete picture.
The public can't quite fathom the fact that 70% of the Earth's surface is not covered by some form of surveillance.
I believe that the impact coming from Aireon will be great, considering that currently just 30% of airspace is covered through radars. With Aireon, 100% of airspace will be covered.
It's something that will revolutionize air traffic control and the way that we fly around the world. And it'll all be done really through the incredible partnership between a unique satellite system, of which there's nothing else like it in the world, and a payload that does something that really no one ever thought could happen.
This is the first time we've ever been able to have a system where every aircraft in the world, all the time, its position is completely known accurately.
As an air navigation service provider, you want to make sure you have the safest systems available to you. And it's absolutely required if we want to maintain our reputations as being the safest or one of the safest air navigation service providers in the world.
We don't have great surveillance coverage today and not a lot of infrastructure. It's not realistic to put in ground-based surveillance. So with a total global solution and space-based ADS-B, we'll have coverage in places we've never had it before.
Aireon will have a great impact on remote regions, for example, Africa, where we have a very poor surveillance today. It will really improve the surveillance and therefore give a more safer environment.
We currently sit with an environment where we know that the coverage from a surveillance perspective, it's not at the level where we would like it to be.
With a space-based system, all the parameters and the areas of coverage can be defined and changed within a matter of days. So the flexibility of the system is really adding the biggest value.
Now having a harmonized, a single source of surveillance of which is common to everyone, so you do not have different standards as you're flying across the world.
We are one of the NSPs. We have our own network, and I think we can cover most of the 16 square kilometers of a second.
It brings this commonality and uniformity that will make it easier for many areas to adopt the same procedures.
We have in the northwestern sector of our FIR, we don't have the surveillance. So with the space-based ADS-B, we have a complete surveillance coverage in our airspace. It will simplify the way we hand over air traffic.
The North Atlantic is basically full. We can't fit any more aircraft onto it, certainly not in the areas they want to fly. So we can give them better choice of routes, we can give them better choices of speed, better choices of levels, and we can do all of that while improving safety and capacity.
NAV Canada's #1 priority is safety. And there is little doubt that Aireon is going to bring an enhanced level of safety to air travel.
We can condense our spacing. We can use more efficient routes because we can turn aircraft while being able to see other aircraft and avoid them and not have to wait until they make reports that they might be late in making. might not be as accurate as we want them to be.
At this point in time, we don't even recognize what the global impact will be. I mean, the opportunity to use Aireon data signals anywhere on the globe to provide safe and efficient air transport is phenomenal.
We're just at the tip of the iceberg in terms of exploiting the capabilities well beyond the huge ones that are obvious with space-based ADS-B.
Much like the internet has done for communication and knowledge, I think what Aireon will do for aviation, it will transform the level of knowledge and awareness of not only coverage for airports, airlines, operators, but even the general public, of the ability to track and follow where their loved ones, family, friends, or aircraft are up into the second.
It is going to have a huge impact on safety. It's going to have a huge impact on the efficiency of carriers' operations. It is going to have a huge impact on the way capital is deployed in support of aviation and air traffic control around the world. Aireon changes everything.
It will genuinely improve the performance of the air traffic management industry through improved tracking and surveillance, and with the data that it also generates for other purposes.
Everybody's coming together to create a capability that will provide global impact. For those who just joined us, there's some additional seats up here if you'd like to grab a seat. Well, this video shows the incredible reach of Aireon. The world is truly coming together to deploy space-based ADS-B. So, back to today's announcement and why you are all here today and why you're tuning in around the world. We are proud to share that as of today, the Aireon system is officially live and fully operational and is being used by air traffic controllers in Canada and the UK to manage air traffic across the North Atlantic. For the first time in history, 100% of the globe has real-time aircraft surveillance for all ADS-B equipped aircraft. This is an historic achievement on par with some of the most significant advancements in aviation. It will immediately improve the way air traffic is managed and how aircraft are flown, making air travel safer, more efficient, and less expensive. Before I walk through some of the key milestones of our 8-year journey here today, I'd like to explain some of the significance of today's announcement by providing some background on how Aireon came to be and explain how the system is revolutionizing global air travel. Many have been shocked to learn that when they fly over the ocean, their plane is no longer being tracked in real time by air traffic control. What's even more shocking to learn is the case that approximately 70% of global airspace is uncovered, or was until today. This lack of surveillance has existed because the ground-based radar systems the aviation industry has relied on since the 1940s cannot provide global surveillance coverage. In order to accommodate this lack of coverage, the air traffic control has created a system of highways in the sky over remote areas where planes are kept sometimes 80 to 100 miles apart, flying along very specific routes at exact speeds and altitudes. This approach ensured that the skies are safe, but at the expense of increasing the fuel costs and restricting more direct flights. Air traffic control organizations around the world have been upgrading ground-based systems to a newer GPS-based technology known as ADS-B, or Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast. This allows airplanes to broadcast their exact position on very frequent and very precise intervals, greatly improving air traffic surveillance. However, these ADS-B systems are exclusively ground-based, meaning the same problem exists over the oceans in remote terrestrial regions. This is where the concept of the Aireon system was born. Aireon saw and seized on the opportunity to deploy ADS-B in space, where the limitations of terrestrial-based systems are no longer an issue. To create a space-based ADS-B network, we used the incredibly powerful and unique Iridium satellite constellation that covers the entire globe and can get data from anywhere to anywhere in real time. Iridium just completed the launch of 66 next-generation satellites, plus 9 on-orbit spares, and Aireon has placed ADS-B receivers on board each of those new Iridium Next satellites, where they pick up the automatic position messages broadcast from every aircraft equipped with ADS-B transponders. Operating outside the restrictions imposed on ground-based infrastructure, we have expanded air traffic visibility to the entire planet, including over the oceans and remote areas where it's never existed before. It is important to note, most aircraft are already equipped with ADS-B technology, and it is line fit on every new aircraft. This is driven primarily by the FAA, the European Union, and other aviation regulators that have issued mandates requiring equipment on all aircraft by 2020. With Aireon's space-based ADS-B system, a complete and comprehensive view of all airspace is made possible. With this increased visibility comes a host of substantial safety, efficiency, and environmental benefits to look forward to. For example, Aireon will support important improvements in safety, including improved controller situational awareness, reducing the risk of loss of aircraft separation, and eliminating safety gaps due to lack of real-time surveillance. Reduced controller response time to abnormal situations such as weather deviations or gross navigation errors, and improved search and rescue response times. The use of Aireon will enhance air traffic efficiencies through optimized flight paths, through improved traffic flows. Real-time surveillance will allow airplanes to fly and plan more direct routes, saving substantial amounts of fuel. For example, in the North Atlantic alone, they are looking at more than $300 per flight in cost savings. This also enables a significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. The study by Purdue University has predicted that over a 10-year period from 2020 to 2030, space-based ADS-B can make it possible to prevent approximately 14.3 million metric tons of CO2 globally from entering the atmosphere. Just for perspective, that's on the order of 300,000 cars removed from the US road each year. In addition to the many benefits, the Aireon system creates a robust and comprehensive data set of global ADS-B aircraft movements. For the first time, one global data set is available for air traffic control, supporting global air traffic analysis, airspace and air route redesign, capacity and resource planning, predictability analysis for arrivals and departures, and fleet optimization. Certainly the power of Aireon's global ADS-B surveillance capability was demonstrated by the use of the Aireon data in the accident investigation and ultimate decision to ground the Boeing 737 MAX by the NTSB, the FAA, Transport Canada, and the European Union. This has the potential to lead future aviation innovations not yet imaginable. As you can tell, Aireon's impact spans beyond just the aviation community. The skies are now safer and more efficient than ever, positively impacting everyone who flies. To put into perspective all that was accomplished from concept to operations, I want to walk through some of the key milestones that led us here today. Mind you, these aren't all of the achievements, but I wanted to highlight a few of the key dates and moments to paint a picture of our short and journey here today. The Aireon story began back in 2009, when we were exploring new payloads to put on and host on the Iridium NEXT satellite constellation. This is where we identified the concept to solve one of the biggest problems in aviation, the inability to track and surveil aircraft anywhere in the world. In 2012, with the backing of Iridium Communications, the plan set forth to bring global air traffic surveillance to space on board 66 Iridium NEXT satellites. The same year, NAV Canada joined Aireon as a joint venture partner, allowing us to contract with Harris Corporation to build 81 Aireon-hosted payloads. Fast forward to 2013, another division of Harris, formerly ITT Excelis, was contracted to build Aireon's ground facilities to provide ADS-B data processing and distribution component of the Aireon system. Additionally, ENAV, the air navigation service provider of Italy, the Irish Aviation Authority, and Naviair, the ANSP of Denmark, all made significant equity investments in Aireon, joining NAV Canada and Iridium in making global space-based ADS-B a reality. In 2014, Aireon successfully completed the ADS-B payload qualification for operation in space. NATS, the UK ANSP, became a launch customer and charter ANSP, and Aireon and the Irish Aviation Authority developed the plan to create a free public service for aviation stakeholders called Aireon Alert. Just for background, Aireon Alert service provides the most recently known position of any ADS-B equipped aircraft that is in apparent distress or has lost communications. In 2015, we signed several data service agreements with 3 leading ANSPs: the Civil Aviation Authority of Singapore, Air Traffic and Navigation Services, or AT&S, of South Africa, and the Dutch Caribbean Air Navigation Service Provider, DC-ANSP. That same year, the International Telecommunications Union granted primary allocation of the 1090 megahertz frequency band for reception by satellite of ADS-B signals from aircraft. This was a huge acknowledgement of the importance of global surveillance. In 2016, preparations for launching Iridium Next and the first Aireon payloads began. The team completed pre-launch readiness activities, including end-to-end performance validation of Aireon's technology, prepping the hosted payload operations center, and coordinating with Iridium and Nav Canada for final verification. By mid-2016, all 81 Aireon payloads were built, and we signed an additional agreement with the Seychelles Civil Aviation Authority to provide complete surveillance of the Seychelles Flight Information Region. We closed 2016 by securing a partnership with FlightAware to launch Global Beacon, a solution that provides airlines with real-time tracking designed to ensure ICAO Global Aeronautical Distress and Safety System, or GADIS, compliance. FlightAware has also integrated our space-based ADS-B data into their other products to serve airline operational needs. 2017 was a big year for Aireon, including 4 successful Iridium Next launches, delivering 40 Aireon hosted payloads to orbit. At that point, the system already received 25 billion ADS-B position report messages, and our customers began receiving live data for test and validation. In addition to the launches and technical milestones achieved, 2 rounds of successful flight tests were completed with the FAA and Nav Canada of the Aireon system. 2018 was historic, completing 3 successful Iridium Next launches, increasing the total number of payloads in orbit to 65, just shy of completion. That year, we also shared that the UK Air Traffic Management Service, NATS, joined Aireon investors by making an equity investment in Aireon in addition to already being a launch customer. On the new customer front, we signed a data service agreement with the Agency for Aerial Navigation Safety in Africa and Madagascar, otherwise known as ASECNA, to bring real-time air traffic surveillance to highly trafficked terrestrial African corridors. We also announced a strategic partnership with Airbus to provide space-based data feed to the AirSense product, and we opened up the Aireon Alert service for pre-registration to all aviation stakeholders. We currently have 143 active registrants in Aireon Alert that include ANSPs, regulators, airlines, and search and rescue organizations. We ended 2018 with a major achievement. Our joint product with FlightAware, Global Beacon, went live in advance of the November 8th, 2018 ICAO GADIS deadline, providing airlines with minute-by-minute global aircraft tracking for their ADS-B equipped aircraft at all times, anywhere in the world. Currently, approximately 100 airlines and aircraft operators have signed up for either Global Beacon or the space-based ADS-B service through FlightAware and their distribution partners. Finally, we kicked off 2019 with a successful final launch of the Iridium Next service on January 11th, 2019. This completed the launch campaign, delivering all new satellites and Aireon payloads to orbit. In February 2019, Iridium announced that the Iridium Next constellation was complete, providing 100% global satellite coverage with 66 new operational satellites, 9 on-orbit spares, and 6 ground spares. That brings us to today, with a live, fully tested, validated, and fully operational Aireon system. I'm sure asking, what's next? Now that the system is complete, our next phase of work is just beginning. Today, the system is fully operational, and air traffic controllers at NAV Canada and NATS are now using Aireon in operational trials over the world's busiest oceanic airspace, the North Atlantic Ocean, as well as in the Canadian terrestrial airspace. These efforts will help set the playbook for deploying the Aireon service across the world through all of our ANSP customers. In addition to the North Atlantic operational trials, we will formally be launching Aireon Alert in the coming weeks. We have also been working in collaboration with the European Aviation Safety Agency, also known as EASA, to obtain organizational safety approval. The certification process will complete a 3-year program where we worked with EASA to perform 4 audits of the Aireon system and the company. The process has been progressing well, and once complete, Aireon will be certified to be a provider of pan-European service to ANSPs and assist in supporting additional certifications with non-EU customers, since these standards are adopted in various regions around the world. This is the first time a non-ANSP has sought this type of certification and will be an important seal approval for Aireon. We've come a long way. We have a long way to go. Many people point out the significant technological advancement that Aireon brings to the aviation industry. But I think the real innovation and advancement is how the global aviation community has come together to help develop and introduce this groundbreaking capability. It is through this partnership that we'll see great advancements and even greater advancements in aviation safety and efficiency. Thank you. Now I'd like to ask Neil Wilson, President and CEO of NAV Canada, to share more on how Aireon will impact the Canadian airspace and further explain the role in deploying the service across the North Atlantic.
Thank you, Don, and good morning, everybody. And as we also say in Canada, bon après-midi tout le monde. And of course, good afternoon to you, Martin, over in the UK. Greetings to everyone around the world watching our webcast, whatever time of day it is. It's a great pleasure for me to be here in Washington, as it always is. I'm a longtime resident of our capital in Canada, Ottawa, but I enjoy each and every visit to Washington to meet with our colleagues at Aireon and Iridium and in the industry. And it's particularly nice to be here, especially when we still have a little bit of winter weather back home. My presence here in the U.S. Capitol representing NAV Canada and Martin representing UK NATS through the magic of broadband technology is very fitting given the international significance of today's announcement. For NAV Canada and UK NATS, the impact of having surveillance over the North Atlantic airspace will be momentous. But going from 30% surveillance coverage to 100% literally affects air traffic control for the entire planet. And as a Canadian, I think it's important to point out that the launch of the Iridium NEXT satellites with the Aireon payload continues a long legacy of Canada's connection with the United States on space and satellite technology. In fact, Canada's first satellite, the Alouette 1, was launched from Vandenberg Air Force Base on September 29, 1962. And that's the same site where the 8 SpaceX rockets were launched carrying the Iridium satellites with the Aireon payload some 55 years later. I also want to emphasize that I would not be standing here if it were not for the tireless work and unwavering devotion of the employees of NAV Canada. It's a testament to their spirit of collaboration and talent for innovation that led to this transformative technology being implemented in a relatively short time. So to those who worked so hard on this project from so many departments, particularly in Gander and Edmonton and Ottawa, but of course in all locations, I want to say thank you. You make me very, very proud. And indeed, the Aireon partnership and the steps to implement space-based ADS-B touch the work of every employee in the company, so you can also be very, very proud. It was only a few short years ago that 100% global air traffic surveillance through low Earth orbit satellites, or LEO satellites, and ADS-B receivers as payloads was just an idea that a few people were talking about. And it moved from the idea stage to a concept, and today to a reality in under a decade. And NAV Canada has been at the forefront of this breakthrough technology from the get-go. It was in the idea stage in early 2011 that some key people from NAV Canada began some informal discussions with our great colleagues at Iridium. And this is when we got to know Don Thoma, who was then working at Iridium. We were presented with a window of opportunity that would not occur again for 20 or more years. Iridium's first generation of LEO satellites were at the end of their life cycle, or coming to the end of their life cycle, and a new constellation was being planned for launch in the coming few years. And at NAV Canada, we quickly saw the potential. We recognized that adding ADS-B receivers as a payload to the new constellation of LEO satellites could bring tremendous safety and efficiency benefits for airlines, air traffic control, and the flying public. Ground-based ADS-B was already a proven technology that we were using in parts of Canada's north, and onboard avionics were widely in use and growing rapidly. Discussions and meetings led to our partnership with Iridium to establish the new company called Aireon that we announced here in Washington in June of 2012. NAV Canada, as an air navigation service provider, was a natural partner for Iridium, the communications satellite company that would make the system happen. We also knew that NAV Canada would be an air navigation service provider that would see significant benefits from global surveillance. In short, we wanted to make sure that this happened. It didn't take long before other countries' air navigation service providers decided to invest in Aireon. And today, we at NAV Canada are very pleased to be partners not only with Iridium, but with ENAV of Italy, the Irish Aviation Authority, Naviair of Denmark, and finally our co-star today, UK NATS. Now, you've already heard from Dawn about the per-flight fuel cost savings, about $300 per flight for flights over the North Atlantic. And Martin is going to tell you about the CO2 savings, or the reduction in CO2 emissions that will result from that as well. But I think we can't overlook how this technology will increase safety through the continuous surveillance of aircraft over the ocean, not previously available. Further, I'd like to announce that in addition to the oceanic airspace, the Aireon signal is turned on in parts of Canadian domestic airspace, where there's already surveillance coverage through radar or ground-based ADS-B. This includes a large territory over Alberta and the skies over Newfoundland and Labrador. We will be phasing in space-based ADS-B to include our northern and Arctic regions. That airspace is currently without surveillance, so the benefits that Aireon will bring will be similar to the North Atlantic. This includes greater efficiency and the added safety that surveillance over mountainous area operations and remote airspace will deliver. A safe, efficient system is going to become that much safer, that much more efficient. Before I turn it back to Dawn and then over to Martin, I want to note that the importance of today's advancement to aviation efficiency and in particular safety cannot be underestimated. Space-based ADS-B is truly a game changer for us in Canada, but also for everyone who flies everywhere in the world. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for your attention. And Dawn, with that, over to you again.
Thank you, Neil. Now, if we can turn our attention to Martin Rolfe, the CEO of NATS, who will be broadcast live from London.
Thank you, Don, and thank you, Neil. Good morning to everyone in DC and to those watching the live stream. I'm really sorry I can't be with you today in person, but I'm very excited to be joining you, if be it virtually, on this very auspicious occasion. In 1919, when John Alcock and Arthur Brown completed the first non-stop crossing of the Atlantic, they did so in a converted First World War Vickers Vimy biplane bomber. It's hard to imagine what that must have felt like, flying open to the elements in an aircraft made of canvas and wood across the vastness of the Atlantic Ocean. They were pioneers in a revolution that would go on to change the world. Now, 100 years after that first flight, we're embarking on another revolution in the skies above the Atlantic. In many ways, we've come a long way since those early pioneers, and I'm sure you're glad to hear that. Where there was just one, today more than 500,000 flights a year make the crossing. And it's a figure that's growing every year, with traffic set to reach 800,000 flights per year by 2030. But despite that record-breaking growth, which had made the North Atlantic the world's busiest piece of oceanic airspace, previous technology has not allowed us to monitor aircraft in anything near real time. As a result, flights must follow set routes, at set speeds, and at set heights, telling us where they are every 14 minutes. That's a method that's worked for decades, but has not allowed us to make the important capacity, efficiency, and safety improvements we want to offer our airline customers. It's a very 20th century solution to a 21st century problem, but all that starts to change as of today, thanks to Aireon. As we speak, our air traffic controllers based in Prestwick in Scotland, together with our friends at NAV Canada and the Irish Aviation Authority, are trialling the use of Aireon's real-time data to manage the safe passage of hundreds of flights across the ocean. That's an historic achievement, and I want to pay tribute to Don and the Aireon team, alongside the hundreds of people across NAV Canada and NATS that have worked incredibly hard over the last 8 years to make this a reality. We've gone from an operational environment where we were seeing aircraft positions every 14 minutes to just 8 seconds. That's totally transformative in terms of safety performance. If a pilot inputs the wrong instruction or needs our help, we'll know about it and be able to assist in seconds rather than minutes. It's also allowing us to trial a safe separation reduction down from 40 or even 80 nautical miles to just 14. That in turn means we can increase the capacity on the fastest and most fuel efficient routes. Up to 90% of flights across the North Atlantic will now be given the flight routes they ask for, compared with just 60% beforehand. 8 out of every 10 flights will now be able to fly without any kind of speed restriction, compared with the far less efficient fixed speed environment we previously had to operate within. These changes, made possible by Aireon, will generate net savings of up to $300 in fuel and 2 tonnes of CO2 per flight. That adds up to a saving of 1 million tonnes of CO2 by 2030 based on current traffic forecasts. In every respect, Aireon makes flying safer, more efficient and more predictable. Looking beyond the North Atlantic, I know Don has been talking to air traffic service providers around the world, all of whom are excited at the prospect of what this technology can deliver. Aireon does away with 2 of the historic challenges of providing global aircraft surveillance across the world's most remote places, whilst also dealing with the ongoing cost of maintaining expensive ground-based infrastructure. There is no doubt in my mind that we are seeing the dawn of a new era for air traffic management, and NATS is absolutely delighted to be part of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Again, I can't thank the Aireon team, our partners and investors enough for helping us reach this moment. We truly believe that Aireon will change the way the world flies for the better. Now, I'd like to introduce Jesse Hillenbrand, Aireon's Director of Marketing and Public Relations, who will moderate the Q&A portion of today's event.
Does anybody have any questions?
Hi, Henry Canada Aviation Week. I'll start out with some dumb ones. I take it this requires absolutely no modification from the standard ADS-B out equipage on the aircraft. Even though the signal's going up, you don't need another antenna going up or anything like that.
That's absolutely the case, and that's one of the really enabling elements of this system. The fact that the regulators of the US, of Europe, of Australia, et cetera, had mandated that all aircraft flying into their airspace had to be equipped by 2020, enabled us to do this in the time frame that we've achieved it.
Okay. Second question is, and again, my understanding is pretty crude here, but there have been some worries about the ADS-B out system in the U.S., vulnerability to hacking, spoofing, and things like that. Does this solve all those problems, or does this basically have the similar kind of vulnerabilities to really malicious, sophisticated attacks that might come?
Well, this certainly helps that process. The diversity of the system will enable new capabilities to help address that issue. So for one point to realize, we've built this system with the support of ANSPs, our partners at NAV Canada, at NATS, at Irish Aviation Authority, ENAV, Naviair, et cetera, but also the FAA. The FAA is involved in the design and development of this as a collaborator, and we've built the system to the cybersecurity elements of all of those organizations. I would also point out that we've also made use of the unique elements of the Iridium system, the fact that multiple satellites can see a given aircraft at any time, to build in some additional robustness against spoofing the system. So we've taken all of these items, including the basic design of the ADS-B technology, and tried to enhance that in our implementation of the Aireon system.
Thanks. Nick Zazuli, Avionics International. I got two for you. First of all, you got into a little bit the potential savings from reducing separation over the ocean. I'm wondering where exactly you guys are in working with regulators and where the regulators are in terms of approving that sort of thing worldwide, and kind of which regulators, because that's obviously something that a lot of people would have to be in on for that to actually go into effect and to see those benefits.
Okay. Well, so we work at multiple levels. Okay, at the basic level, we work with our customers, with NAV Canada, with NATS, and our other nine customers around the world, to provide them the information they need to supply to their regulators for approval. So in addition to that, there are a set of regulations that are handled at a group level, at the ICAO level, and over the past several years, really being led by our customers and their state representatives, a new separation standard has been defined that enables the reduction in separation with ATS surveillance or space-based ADS-B in an oceanic environment that would enable this reduced separation, which is really the key to enabling a lot of the new benefits that you'll see from using space-based ADS-B surveillance in the ocean. On top of that, I mentioned in my presentation, we've been working with the European Aviation Safety Agency to get Aireon as a system approved as a surveillance capability that would allow the European Union members to use the system. And that's, I can't understate the importance of that, because that's not just a review of our technology or a review of the operations, it's a review of the whole company. They look at all of our design processes, our procedures, our training, our human resources, our operating call center responses to customer problems, and provide us, a detailed audit and findings and fixes. And for us as a new company, it's incredibly important to have that level of input, because it makes us a much better company and really has gotten us here today. That's what enables all of our customers then to go back to their regulators with a very solid safety case to gain approval for the use of the system. I don't know, Neil, if you
Yeah, and if I can just add, in the case of Canada, each ANSP has to have regulatory approval for their own domestic airspace. Don's really addressed the oceanic airspace. In Canada, we've worked closely with Transport Canada to obtain the necessary regulatory approvals. It's seen the combination of space-based ADS-B and existing communication standards has allowed us to proceed with the trials that we have and the work that we're doing in our domestic terrestrial airspace.
Great. And the second question, I'm curious if you can explain in the case you mentioned the 737 MAX and how your guys' technology was used for the decisions to ground that. The American officials mentioned kind of that they had the data on that in more or less real time. Curious if you can explain the decisions to kind of get that to them, given that the U.S. is not a client, kind of not to suggest you shouldn't have, but what the process of that was, getting that to them and why, and kind of how that all worked out.
So first, let me start with the fact that ADS-B is an incredibly rich data source, right? Unlike radar, which has limitations in the amount of data you get through. ADS-B, as Vinny said in the video, not only provides location, it provides velocity, heading, aircraft identity, it provides other parameters on GPS quality, et cetera. So it's a very fulsome data source in that case. So that's what we collect globally. And that's one of the powers of not only ADS-B, but a global surveillance system. So first, we do have a relationship with the FAA, with our partners at Harris Corporation. As I mentioned before, the FAA has been involved in the program really since 2011. In a design development perspective, I've attended all of our design reviews, test reviews with our partners at NAV Canada and other investors at that point. So they have a very good knowledge of the system. So under that relationship, literally the same day of the accident, they contacted us, contacted Vinny Capizzuto on the topic, asking if we had data, because this occurred obviously in Africa where there was no data source. They hadn't collected the black box yet. And we provided that data to the FAA and to the NTSB accident investigators at that point in time, so that they could look at that data. So, and over the next several days, we provided them with some resource or technical expertise out of Vinny's team to help understand the details of the data sets that we created. And that, quite frankly, was available the day of the event. It took us a very short period of time to pull that data. But remember, it's one piece of an accident investigation, and we're not the experts. Aireon collects the data. We're not experts in the performance of a Boeing aircraft in that point. So our mission was to give that data to the people who can make those assessments. We were also requested by Transport Canada for the data, as well as the Irish Aviation Authority, because of their role as a regulator over fleets of 737 MAX aircraft. So we're trying to be very responsible citizens. We're a provider to our customers, air navigation service providers. We're not accident investigators. We've got a data source. We make that available.
Any other questions?
Hi, Caleb Henry with Space News. So just looking at this map here, we talked about the FAA, we talked about Europe. The other place where you see the most traffic is China. Are you in talks with Chinese regulators for Aireon to be used there?
Hi, Caleb. We're in discussions with a lot of ANSPs about the use of this service. This is a big event for us. As I said, we already have agreements with 11. We've got a whole series of discussions with a number of areas. We don't really comment on the specifics of ones, except for the ones that we've released publicly. But let's just say on a global level, there's lots of interest in the data for multiple uses, both for air traffic control purpose, but there's also interest in other opportunities. For example, countries want to know the aircraft that are flying into their airspace. So there's also desire by different organizations to get that data. So I don't want to comment specifically about China, but let's just say there's a lot of organizations around the world, and you can make your assessment on where the air traffic is of who potentially would be interested in that data.
Okay, and you talked about providing data to the FAA. In the past, you've also talked about the FAA as a high prospective customer. Can you give us an update on where those customer negotiations are, seeing how you've just demonstrated that you clearly had something that they wanted?
Yep, absolutely. Look, I mean, you can see the map up there. The U.S. has the responsibility for managing a significant amount of oceanic airspace. It's 20% of the world's ocean are controlled by U.S. air traffic controllers. The FAA obviously is a leader in ADS-B. One of the first countries to invest big in ADS-B. There's a system that Harris operates for the FAA of 635 towers around the continental U.S. that use ADS-B. Clearly, it's important to U.S. aviation. I mentioned before, the FAA has been involved in this program since 2011. They've working very closely with us, running flight tests. There's a live data feed of the U.S. data flowing into the tech center for a test and validation. You may have seen last fall, the FAA announced that they plan to begin operational trials with this service in the Caribbean airspace, a small part of their airspace. They have not made a commitment yet to deploy this across their entire oceans, but they're on a plan to do that. I would say, if you talk to the U.S. aviation stakeholders, the importance that fuel savings, the U.S. airlines would like to see that fuel savings and operational benefits in the U.S. oceans. It's a greenfield site. They've made substantial investments in avionics to meet the ADS-B mandate, and the oceans provide an opportunity to get some of that benefit early. Obviously, U.S. has the best air traffic controllers, or some of the best air traffic controllers in the world. I gotta
thank you.
Gotta say that to Paul's benefit, but they want the best tools as well. So I think there's a lot of interest in getting the FAA to move quicker. In our viewpoint, the FAA takes safety as the #1 priority, like all ANSPs do, and they're a leader in the world in aviation safety. They have the tools and capability to use this. We're confident that they're gonna move quicker, but you really should ask that question to them, whether what their time frame is. But as I said, they'll start later this year with an operational trial in the Caribbean.
Okay, and then last question, which is on revenue. Now that this service is active, when do you anticipate starting to generate revenue, and when do you anticipate being cash flow positive?
The invoice has already been sent. So we are generating revenue as we speak. I think we've said in the past, the customers that we currently have signed have put us into a very, very good position, and by next year we should be in a cash flow positive position. Thanks, Caitlin.
Good morning. Sohan from the Washington Business Journal. Since we're already on the topic of revenue, how much revenue did the company generate for 2018? And I'm wondering how that number compares to 2017's number.
Yeah, so remember, today is a really important day for us because we go operational. Up until this point, we were investing all of our funding, if you will, into deploying the system that can see 11,000 plus aircraft. So we're really today starting a revenue generating posture. We may have made nothing. Yeah, I'm looking at our CFO back there. So today is when we start generating revenue.
And how do you predict that number to be?
Well, one of the great things about being a private company is we don't release information like that. So you may find that out later on as we start generating returns to our investors, but we don't release the.
And in terms of employees that the company employs, how's that number looking, and how do you expect that number to change this year?
Yep. Well, we've been growing quite a bit. We're based out of Tyson's Corner. We're co-located right now with Iridium Communications. Later this year, we'll be moving to another facility, an Aireon single facility. We currently have 75 employees directly employed by Aireon. We have a substantial number of employees working within the Harris Corporation that support Aireon operating our ground data processing system and doing all the development work on the data. Iridium has probably a dozen employees that are supporting Aireon on our services. They operate all the satellite payloads out of the control center in Leesburg. So we've got a pretty big presence here in the Washington region, through ourselves and through our partners at Harris and at Iridium. It all depends. I expect that over time we'll grow to probably 100 plus employees directly in the Aireon company, but that all depends on global adoption and how we need to support our customers globally.
Hi, Don and Neil. Lori Aratani from the Washington Post. I'm curious, I'm looking at this map with all these white dots. Can you paint me sort of a before picture? Before Aireon, would we just be looking at clusters of dots over North America, Europe, and China, and the rest would all be blank?
Yeah, so before today, or I should say before the Aireon system was launched, because we've been watching this for a while, in this case, what you would see is data feeds basically that are provided by the FAA. You can subscribe, if you will, to the service that takes all the ground-based radars and ADS-B data that's provided. So you'd see a very similar picture in the U.S. and in Europe, where that publicly available data is in place. But in the oceans, you would see almost nothing. I mean, basically, this is again, one of the strange things. When we fly in an airplane across to Europe or over to Asia, we're looking at that map on the seat see back front in the screen, and we're seeing a nice line of the plane going forward. So we all think, this is where we are. Everybody knows where we are. And the reality is, you know where you are, right? The pilot knows where the plane is, but he's, as Martin said, only reporting back every 14 minutes the location of that aircraft. So what you end up seeing is a dot every 100 miles or something like that across from one given airplane. And it's an estimation. It's typically delayed, right, because it goes through a communications path, not a real-time feed. So, this was the amazing thing. And maybe, Neil, you can talk to it because your controllers just saw the map without ADS-B, their screens, and then all of a sudden they saw it with their screens. Maybe you can give it just a reaction to some of your people.
So what's happened historically is when you don't know where the aircraft are specifically, you use what we call as procedural air traffic control. So you have to put a big bubble around each aircraft because you don't know precisely where they are. You have the position reports, as Martin and Don have said, every number of minutes. That gets ingested into a system, so you have some sense of where they are and where they're going. But now you know where they are specifically with this report every 8 seconds or better in some situations, so you know precisely where they are. So the other day, we turned this on in Gander for our oceanic controllers, and you could see the screen just pop up, lights going on right across the Atlantic, as the controllers were then given the opportunity to know precisely where these aircraft were at all times. So as Don says, yes, in the past we have robust infrastructure across the United States, the southern part of Canada, but certainly not in the ocean, not in mountainous areas, not in remote areas. We now have that capability. So those areas where they were blank or they were populated by some system generating some image, we now know precisely where those aircraft are with great specificity.
Yep.
Hello, Bill Carey with Aviation Week. For Mr. Wilson, just wanted to follow up on the turning on the system in Gander, and how has the trial proceeded in the few days since it started? Have you implemented those longitudinal separations to 14 miles? And is there any way that airlines will notice this, perhaps in their scheduling? Because that, I would think, automatically opens up the capacity of the North Atlantic tracks.
Sure. So one thing about air traffic controllers is they love technology, and so providing this tool to them, they were asking that it be turned on days before we were planned to go ahead. So we turned it on, and they started seeing this. And we have some great internal communication systems where everybody gets to show pictures and talk to each other, and we're already seeing the first controller saying, look, I just gave them a climb. Look, I just gave them a better routing. Look what I've just been able to do here. So we're already in the Gander Oceanic Control Zone starting to see exactly that, better routings, better altitudes, those sorts of things. Similarly in Edmonton, they're also very, very excited about it. So we're on a trial right now out over the ocean. We're not going to be charging for this service, not going to charge our customers for some period of time, so that our controllers can get used to the system, so that the customers can start getting used to the system and how really to take advantage of this new system to get the kind of benefits that we've been talking about. The better routings, the better altitudes, the variable speeds, these sorts of benefits that come from the use of, that's now available, space-based ADS-B. So we won't charge for some period of time. We'll work with them, work with their flight planning people, work with the people executing on the flight plans to really start enabling them to start seeing the benefits that come from this. But yeah, our controllers are just thrilled by the use of this.
Just to be clear though, you're not continuing with the procedural separations and having this in some sort of shadow mode, right? This is the primary surveillance.
This is the system we're using right now, yes. Yes.
Are there any other questions in the room? All right, we have time to take one question that came in via email, and it talks about the stakeholders who are participating in the North Atlantic trials. Neil, can you give a little bit of detail of who exactly is participating, other than NAV Canada and NATS, in the North Atlantic trials?
So everybody who flies the North Atlantic is using it. In the past, because we had procedural air traffic control, we had established tracks, and so you were on a track if you were going across the North Atlantic. Certain flights and certain carriers were off the tracks. They had different flight routings. But all are participating now, and if you're equipped with the appropriate transponders and equipment as a carrier, you are participating. And The equipage rate over the North Atlantic, Don may know better than I, but it's in the high 90%. So virtually all carriers flying the North Atlantic now are part of this trial, hopefully taking advantage and learning from it and learning how to make their flights more efficient and safer.
Well, thank you all for joining us today for this momentous occasion. As a last and final part of today's events, we have a closing video, which is a compilation from a few members of the Aireon team. The Aireon story, as I see it, is one of innovation and partnership. People think about Aireon as a new technology. In reality, we're just using existing technology but deploying it in a different way. Our launch customers are the innovators, the true believers, the visionaries on how to improve air traffic control. They're also looking at how they can benefit the broader air traffic control community.
We're not in the game of figuring out where the aircraft is. We're in the game of getting the data from the aircraft and transferring it to the air traffic controller. It doesn't just give you the latitude, longitude, and of course the altitude, but it does these quality factors: integrity, accuracy, software design assurance. Obviously from the global perspective, you're getting it from when you depart to land. There's no holes in the coverage. You're able to monitor and see the system's tracker perform. Up to this point, it's been a development deployment state, and it's been many years of that, and it's been very technical, and it has been interfacing with customers to get their requirements and to understand their environment. But each air navigation service provider is unique, and for us, we treat each customer as every one of them is our #1 customer.
Everybody's coming together to create a capability that will provide global impact.
All the ANSPs that are working with us are seeing this as the future. It's a capability that enables a lot of things to happen and to move forward. Introduction of space-based ADS-B allows for an early adoption of ADS-B technology without installing any ground-based layers. It's a unique augmentation to a capability that many ANSPs are looking for. Going live is the start of a journey. We have a lot more to do. There's a lot of ANSPs in the world that haven't adopted the technology yet, so I think we'll be spending a lot of time with our partners to introduce ADS-B surveillance across the world.
Now that Aireon's live, we enter a new world of maintaining the operations and ensuring that our customers are #1.
It's a big world out there. All the airspace is different. And as we work with each of our ANSP customers, we see a process by which they understand what full surveillance can do for them, how it can improve safety, how it can improve the services that they provide to their airline customers. And that process unveils a unique solution each time for each customer.